In another bid to defuse tension, senior Russian and Ukrainian officials met in Paris along with French and German counterparts. The talks lasted 8 hours and all parties agreed to a ceasefire in eastern Ukraine. French officials said that some progress was made in the Normandy format talks. The meeting had focused not on the Russian military buildup, but on resolving the separatist fighting in eastern Ukraine since 2014. For the first time since 2019, Ukraine and Russia agreed to sign a joint statement, along with France and Germany, about the ongoing conflict between Ukrainian forces and separatists in eastern part of the country. The four nations have been working together, trying to foster a peace deal for eastern Ukraine since 2014 and are collectively known as the Normandy Group. Both Ukraine and Russian officials had an optimistic outlook after the talks.
Сторони абсолютно відкрито задекларували, що існує багато розбіжностей між Україною і Російською Федерацією щодо і виконання Мінських домовленостей, і трактування Мінських домовленостей, але при цьому є бажання працювати над цими розбіжностями.
У нас состоялся непростой разговор, но, может быть, первый такой разговор довольно откровенный для того, чтобы провести инвентаризацию всех проблем, которые связаны с реализацией Минских соглашений.
Both sides are set to meet once again in 2 weeks' time, this time in Berlin. But the Russian envoy made clear that for the moment a summit involving heads of state was not on the agenda. But the talks are a positive development after days of heightened tensions, where both NATO and US readied troops for military deployment. Several countries like the US, UK and Canada also encouraged their citizens to leave Ukraine, fearing an imminent invasion. But Ukraine's government has played down the danger, hoping to prevent panic among its own citizens. Ukraine says that while Russian troops posed a threat to Ukraine, the numbers deployed were insufficient for a full-scale offensive.
The number of Russian troops amassed along the border of Ukraine and in the occupied territories of Ukraine is large. It poses a threat to Ukraine, a direct threat to Ukraine. However, at the moment, as we speak, this number is insufficient for the full-scale offensive against Ukraine along.
Let's talk more about this. Ross Cullen is joining us live from Paris. Ross, good to see you again. After 8 hours of diplomatic talks, French officials have said that progress was made during the talks. What does this mean for the conflict escalating at the Ukrainian border?
The talks lasted, Eric, as you say, actually more than 8 hours, 8.5 hours, but the communique that was released at the end, the statement, the joint readout that was released by the four parties, Ukraine, Russia, France and Germany, didn't even amount to 8.5 sentences. It was very short. They agreed to meet again, the ministers, the advisors said they would meet in Berlin in 2 weeks' time, so they have said they needed a pause, they needed a reset for a couple of weeks, and then all four advisors are going to be meeting again in the German capital to perhaps, as you mentioned, try to lay the groundwork for a possible summit of the presidents, the three presidents and the German Chancellor as well. That is something that that Germany is particularly keen on, heads of state getting together to try to thrash out this security crisis at the top level. But for the moment, we've had this advisors meeting in Paris, a very long meeting. What they did agree to is a reaffirmation, just confirming previously agreed points related to the ceasefire in eastern Ukraine, the implementation of the Minsk agreements. Now, this is a set of proposals designed to stop the war in eastern Ukraine with Russian-speaking separatists. They did not make any major commitment related to this specific latest security crisis linked to the massive build-up of Russian troops on the Ukrainian border, which the US has described as a provocative build-up of troops by Russia. Russia has accused the US of inflaming the tensions by putting more than 8,000 American soldiers on high alert. There were some hopes that because the talks ran so long on Wednesday that there could potentially be a breakthrough, but it seems that they have found very little areas of common alignment, very little areas where they can agree to cooperate. So in fact, the only thing they could actually find accord on is to postpone the next round of talks for 2 weeks.
Ross, despite these countries showing a unified, face of it, Germany's stance in the war has not been clear given the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. So, do the European powers still remain divided on the action that they will take against Russia in case of an invasion?
What we saw yesterday, Eric, was the French and German advisors leading the talks for the Western point of view from the European Union. Emmanuel Macron has been very clear that he wants to play a leading role in diplomacy this week. He has a call scheduled with Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, tomorrow, Friday. And of course, he was hosting the talks yesterday in his presidential office and residence, even though the talks were at advisor level. But you're right that when it comes to France and Germany, they would have wanted yesterday to present a united approach, because that is something that we have heard many times before from NATO, from the United States, from the European Union, that all Western allies are aligned, they are all coordinated, they are all working together to try to deal with this threat from Russia, despite the fact that there are divisions within the alliance, particularly, as you mentioned, Germany's reliance on gas supplies coming from Russia and the fears among some allies that there could be a weaponizing strategy by Russia if it chooses to disrupt some of those gas supplies coming to Europe. And that is why we have seen the US already start to make contingency plans to perhaps increase its flows of gas, liquefied natural gas being shipped to Europe, and perhaps opening up other talks for gas supplies not to be interrupted by using other gas producers, for example, in the Gulf countries like Qatar. So there is a strategy in place to try to deal with the supply of gas if that is interrupted. But France really trying to assure Germany that the best way to deal with this strategy is to present a coordinated approach. That's something that Emmanuel Macron has said explicitly. Europe must be united to show solidarity with Ukraine, but we must have a punitive reaction ready if Russia has any more aggressive moves towards Ukraine, but we must also maintain that dialogue with Russia, keep the lines of communication open. That's exactly what we will see tomorrow when Emmanuel Macron picks up the phone to Vladimir Putin.
Live from Paris, France, Ross Cullen, thank you. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.